In 1922, an unassuming Los Angeles housewife named May Otis Blackburn and her young adult daughter, Ruth Wieland Rizzio, made a startling proclamation. They claimed that the archangels Gabriel and Michael had appeared to them and anointed them as the two prophetic witnesses foretold in the book of Revelation, chapter 11. According to May and Ruth, the angels tasked them with writing a sacred book called the Great Sixth Seal. This divine manuscript, they said, would reveal all the hidden mysteries of life and death, unleash apocalyptic events, and even pinpoint secret treasures of oil and gold buried around the world. The mother-daughter duo presented themselves as holy revelators on a mission, a claim so bold and bizarre that it launched one of Los Angeles' strangest cults. May, 44 years old at the time, and Ruth, 24, officially founded a religious group grandly named the Divine Order of the Royal Arms of the Great 11, often shortened to the Great 11 Club, and later simply dubbed the Blackburn Cult after its leader's surname. The two women fashioned themselves as spiritual royalty. In their teachings, May and Ruth were queens and high priestesses anointed by angelic authority to usher in the end times. Word of the supposed prophets spread just enough to attract a small band of devoted followers in Southern California, perhaps only around a dozen core members, but all intensely loyal. Together, they believed, or at least hoped, that May and Ruth's divinely dictated book would unlock heaven's secrets and trigger the second coming of Christ. The stage was set for an apocalyptic prophecy in the city of angels. Queens, high priestesses, and a wealthy benefactor. Once they had a few followers orbiting them, May and Ruth wasted no time elevating their own status and securing resources for their cult. They preached in flowing robes and adopted regal titles, insisting on being treated as queens in their nascent spiritual kingdom. Charismatic and oddly persuasive, the pair managed to convince followers to part with large sums of money to support the great work. In fact, one enthusiastic disciple, Clifford Dabney, the nephew of a wealthy oil tycoon, handed over nearly $5,000 in cash and assets to the Blackburn Cult, equivalent to about $1 million today. In return, Dabney was promised an insider's preview of the Great Sixth Seal and the riches it would reveal. Among his donations, Dabney deeded the cult a 164-acre parcel of land in the Santa Susana Hills of Simi Valley, California. With a remote piece of land and plenty of funding, May and Ruth established a communal colony for their followers. By the mid-1920s, the group constructed a cluster of rustic cabins on the Simi Valley property, along with a makeshift temple for their rituals. Ever the grandiose planners, the cult even installed an elaborate gilded throne in the temple, a huge 800-pound wooden seat adorned with lion motifs, which they solemnly declared was reserved for Christ's imminent return. Daily life on the compound was strictly controlled. Cult members toiled by day at a nearby tomato packing plant, turning over every paycheck to May and her third husband, Ward Blackburn, whom she dubbed the North Star of the world. By night, the devotees prepared for holy revelry. They believed they were the chosen few who would witness the apocalypse and claim great rewards. All the while, May and Ruth continued to delay publishing the sacred book that supposedly held the key to it all, stringing along their followers' hopes and extracting more donations as the months turned to years. Midnight rituals and macabre rumors. Life in the Blackburn Cult's Simi Valley retreat grew ever more eccentric and eerie. Late at night, robed disciples would gather in a natural amphitheater on the property for elaborate rituals under the stars. By flickering firelight, the two high priestess queens, May and Ruth, carried out ceremonies that ranged from mystical to downright ghastly. According to witness reports, they sacrificed mules during these rites. The poor animals were grimly nicknamed the Jaws of Death by the cult and led their followers in wild nude dances to drum up divine power. One can imagine the surreal scene, an isolated hilltop at midnight, the air ringing with chants and perhaps screams, as robed figures twirl naked around a bloodied altar stone. It sounds like Pulp Fiction, but contemporary news accounts confirm that bizarre midnight gatherings did occur. Local forest rangers even reported seeing the cultists dancing in the nude after the mule sacrifices. Darker rumors soon emerged from the Great Eleven's camp. Whispers of human sacrifice began to spread. In one especially disturbing allegation, a sickly cult member was subjected to a horrific cure. She was placed inside a brick oven and essentially baked alive as a form of ritual healing. This disciple, a 30-year-old woman named Florence Turner, died 2 days after the alleged oven ordeal, fueling speculation that the cult's practices had turned lethal. Other members who had fallen out of favor simply vanished without a trace. At least 4 people associated with the Blackburn Cult disappeared under mysterious circumstances. Among them was Samuel Rizzio, Ruth's 18-year-old husband. Sam had married into the cult in 1924, but later begged his wife to leave the group. After a violent quarrel in which he struck Ruth, Sam Rizzio went missing and was never seen again. It was quietly rumored that May Blackburn had poisoned him in retribution, as well as possibly dispatching others who defied her. To the outside world, these were chilling stories, though at the time authorities had no hard evidence, only the macabre tales told by ex-members and observers. The Blackburn cult's legend was growing sinister. Animal sacrifices, black magic dances, and oven murder, and followers who entered the Simi Valley Hills never to return. The mummified girl under the house. The most bizarre and haunting incident linked to the Blackburn cult came to light in 1929, exposing just how far May Blackburn's supernatural promises had driven her followers. It concerned a 16-year-old girl named Willa Rhodes, a beloved princess of the cult, and the lengths her parents went to in hopes of a miracle. On New Year's Day, 1925, young Willa had tragically died from a simple infection, a toothache that led to a fatal complication. In any normal group, this would have been the end of the story, a sad death and a funeral. But May Blackburn convinced Willa's grief-stricken foster parents, William and Martha Rhodes, that this was not the end. The prophetess assured them that if they preserved Willa's body, their daughter would rise from the dead after exactly 1,260 days, coinciding with the completion of the great prophetic book and the dawn of the apocalypse. The Rhodes family, utterly trusting in Blackburn's divine authority, agreed to do as instructed in hopes of seeing their child live again. What followed was a year-long attempt at mummification. Immediately after Willa's death, her parents and fellow cult members packed the girl's body in a bathtub filled with ice, salt, and spices to prevent decay. For 14 months, the teenager's corpse was kept on ice, allegedly even being transported from place to place as the cult moved locations. They reportedly propped Willa's well-preserved body up in the back seat of a car whenever they traveled, to the horror of any passers-by who thought they glimpsed a living girl riding with them. Eventually, the Rhodeses returned to Los Angeles and settled into a small bungalow in the Venice neighborhood. There, beneath the wooden floorboards of the house, they prepared a more permanent resting place for their daughter. Willa's stepfather built a metal-lined coffin and a secret trapdoor in the floor. The girl's body, still wrapped in spices and salt, was placed in this coffin under the house, essentially in cold storage, awaiting resurrection. In a touching and grotesque additional step, 7 little puppies that had been beloved pets of Willa were sacrificed and entombed alongside her. The 7 dog bodies were arranged around the girl's coffin as symbolic guardians, or as May explained, they represented the 7 tones of the angel Gabriel's trumpet, which would sound to herald Willa's return to life. For over 4 years, Willa Rhodes's parents maintained this morbid vigil, keeping their dead daughter essentially in the basement and praying for a resurrection. The secret only came out when law enforcement began investigating the cult's activities in 1929. Acting on tips from disillusioned ex-members, Los Angeles police obtained a warrant and raided the Rhodes Venice home. There, under the floor, they made a ghastly discovery: the now mummified corpse of 16-year-old Willa, wrapped carefully in spices and surrounded by the tiny carcasses of 7 dogs, exactly as the rumors had described. The scene was like something from a horror movie. Newspapers dubbed Willa the sleeping girl of the Blackburn cult, and her story became front-page news. An autopsy later confirmed that Willa had indeed died of natural causes, the infection, and not from any foul play. However, the attempted resurrection plot was undeniable evidence of the cult's disturbing hold on its followers' minds. Even seasoned detectives were shaken by the fanatical devotion that led two parents to keep their deceased child in a cellar on a promise of miracles. Legal trouble, fraud, trials, and the cult's collapse. The discovery of Willa's body finally propelled authorities to take decisive action against the Blackburn Cult. By 1929, several disillusioned followers, led by the deep-pocketed donor Clifford Dabney, had lost patience for May Blackburn's never-ending forthcoming prophecies. They realized that the Great Sixth Seal book was nowhere near completion, and that the promised riches and apocalypse were indefinitely delayed. Feeling swindled, these ex-members went to the police and courts. Fraud charges were filed accusing May Otis Blackburn of essentially running a con game and bilking her devotees out of a small fortune. Investigators tallied that over the cult's run, May had extracted upwards of $2,000 in cash and assets from her flock, an astronomical sum at the time, roughly $7 million in today's dollars. In late 1929, a Los Angeles grand jury indicted May on numerous counts of grand theft related to these allegations. Newspapers at the time took to calling her a cult leader and painted the Great 11 as a scam cloaked in religious fervor. In March 1930, May Otis Blackburn's case went to trial, creating a media sensation in L.A. She was ultimately convicted on 8 counts of grand theft for defrauding her followers out of 15 counts originally charged. The judge sentenced her to prison time, a range of 1 to 10 years, for essentially selling false promises of divine reward in exchange for money. At last, it seemed the self-proclaimed Queen of the Angels would face earthly justice. Ruth, her daughter, was also charged but managed to avoid conviction or serious punishment, possibly by claiming she too was duped by her mother's claims. May Blackburn, however, did not go quietly. She posted a $10,000 bail to stay out of jail pending appeal and continued to insist that she sincerely believed everything she preached. In a twist worthy of a legal thriller, May's conviction was overturned on appeal in 1931. The California Supreme Court voided the grand theft verdict on a technicality that spoke volumes about American religious freedom. The court ruled that the trial had improperly delved into the cult's bizarre rituals and beliefs, which by themselves were not crimes. The justices noted that there was no clear proof May knew her prophecies were false or that she intended to defraud. For all anyone could tell, she might have truly drunk her own Kool-Aid. As one justice put it, this is a free country, and it is not actionable if the defendant made certain representations as to being divine. In other words, preaching about angels and apocalypse, however unconventional, was protected under freedom of religion, and gullible followers handing over money was not necessarily a crime if they did so by choice. The court even mused that the cult's victims appeared to be of sound mind and simply exercised their own bad judgment. Thus, May Blackburn escaped jail on a legal technicality. The law could not easily distinguish between fraudulent cult leadership and sincere, if delusional, religious fervor. By the early 1930s, however, the Blackburn cult was effectively finished. The sensational trial and its surrounding publicity had thoroughly exposed the group's activities, scandalizing the public and scattering the remaining faithful. May Otis Blackburn, though legally exonerated, had been unmasked in the press as either a con artist or a fanatic, or both. Her doomsday prophecies had decisively failed. The apocalypse never came, and her promised revelations never materialized. Disgraced and with her following in tatters, May lived out a much quieter life in Los Angeles. She did make one last attempt to justify her divine mission. In 1936, May self-published a book titled The Origin of God, which cobbled together some of her cult teachings. Unsurprisingly, it did not spark a new religious movement. May Otis Blackburn died in 1951 at the age of 70, closing the final chapter on the Great 11 cult. Ruth, her daughter, lived until 1978, reportedly never renouncing the strange legacy she shared with her mother. Why so obscure? Looking back, it's remarkable how the Blackburn cult has faded into obscurity given its lurid history. In part, This is because the cult's active membership was always very small, never more than a dozen or so devoted followers at any one time. Unlike infamous sects that grew large or committed headline-grabbing atrocities, the Great 11 remained a fringe curiosity on the margins of 1920s LA. While their practices were certainly ghastly, many of the worst allegations like murder by poison or oven baking were never proven in court. The confirmed crimes were financial in nature, essentially swindling and fraud, which, though serious, didn't etch the Blackburn cult into public memory the way mass violence would. Furthermore, the era in which it arose played a role in its later obscurity. The cult ran its course in the Roaring '20s, long before television or the internet, so its story lived mostly in newspaper articles and word of mouth. Once May's trial was over and her prophecy failed to come true, media interest moved on. The cult literally retreated from the spotlight at one point, decamping for Lake Tahoe and vanishing from news reports. In contrast to other Doomsday groups, there were no lasting communes, no dramatic finale, and no charismatic successors to keep the Blackburn legacy alive. Over the decades that followed, the tale of the Great 11 cult became a forgotten Los Angeles oddity, a dusty footnote in local weird history archives. It wasn't until historians and true crime aficionados revisited the story through books, articles, and the occasional podcast that modern audiences even became aware of it. To this day, no major feature film or widely known documentary has brought the Blackburn cult back into the popular consciousness. For most people, the idea that a mother and daughter in 1920s California led a cult involving mummified girls and sacrificial puppies sounds almost too bizarre to be true. And yet it is true, preserved in court records and old news clippings. All of this makes the Blackburn cult a perfect subject for a chilling historical narrative that many will be hearing about for the very first time. It's a story that reads like Gothic fiction. Ordinary people swept up by promises of angels and immortality, secret rituals in the dead of night, greed, gullibility, and possibly murder, and the tragic, macabre image of a family keeping their dead daughter on ice in hopes of a miracle. The Blackburn cult may not be as infamous as Jonestown or the Manson family, but its strangeness is uniquely captivating.